On Big 49.
Welcome back to Big 49. This is Ryan Hughes, and we're looking ahead.
Yes, we are looking ahead. So last week when we left off, we talked about technique, and you had so much to fill in regards to technique, and I figured for the first 10 minutes of today's show.
Yeah, I got something that we can cover.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's talk about technique first, and that is from Southwick.
Okay.
All right. And what I'm seeing is, why are these two guys the fastest? Okay, you can say that, Sexton passed those guys at the end and this and that, but maybe that's just because fitness and this and that. But you're going to say Deegan and Jet are the fastest guys on the track. And the reason that I'm seeing one thing that they do is, when you watch and go back and watch any of the races, you'll see them straighten their legs more than anybody. They're straightening their legs more than anybody. So when you straighten your legs and you straighten that body up, that's putting weight into the feet. And the feet, if you're on your toes, is putting weight into the rear wheel. If you put weight more into that rear wheel, you're getting more traction. You're getting more. The wheel is going to be on the ground more, especially, let's say, at Southwick through all those rollers. Every time that they go through a roller, you saw them straighten their legs a little bit more, straighten their legs a little more. So, boom, that wheel comes down, the legs become more straight. Wow, it puts it down, puts it down, puts it down. So, if I'm getting more traction in between every bump, that means I'm getting more forward momentum.
Okay.
If my legs are bent, that means that bike is going to kick up a little bit, and let's just say we'll go, let's say with Tom, okay? Tom Vayal. Let's say his legs didn't straight up as much, and his wheel comes off the ground for half a foot, 6 inches, half a foot, 6 inches, half a foot. But now you add that up around the whole track, and maybe his wheels were off the ground for 10 more feet, 20 more feet, 30 more feet than Deegan's was.
Okay.
Now, 30 more feet of my wheel on the ground, well, how much more forward momentum, how much more inertia did I get?
Okay.
And maybe that is that extra half a second, that whatever it is, right? And same with Jet. Jet, you're going to see that happen, and that's where you get that smoothness. Because, again, he makes passes like, wait a minute, he didn't do anything different. He didn't shift up, but he went right by the guy. And so, and you go back, and that's how Stephen Everts used to ride. Very straight legs, and that's always putting the wheel into the ground. And you go back to a Supercross, I forget which one it was, but they had a sand section that was turning and it was rolling.
Okay.
And you look at Roxon, and Roxon never straightened his legs. So his wheel was off the ground, wheels off the ground, wheels were off the ground, back wheel. And Jet straightened his legs every single one, and he went right by him. Okay, so this is something people have to look at, is because when the suspension goes down, it compresses, but when it comes up, it rebounds.
Yep.
It goes through its full movement. It never stops halfway. It doesn't go off a jump and just go halfway. It finishes its movement. So when you're riding a motorcycle, it's very important to finish your movement by straightening your legs or straightening your arms up, let's say off a jump.
Okay.
So if I'm in whoops and I go down, I'm going to squat at the hips. So I'm going to squat at the hips, so now I'm in that squat position. But as that bike comes up, I'm going to straighten my legs up. So the bike comes up or the bike goes down, I'm straightening my legs to follow the momentum of the motorcycle. Not the motorcycle's doing this and my body's only going halfway. Like my legs are always halfway cocked. So it's the same thing off a jump. You see a lot of these amateur riders and a lot of people that grew up kind of wearing neck braces, they'll go off a jump and the arms will always be halfway cocked. They'll never finish the movement. So if you don't finish the movement with your arms, then you're not pushing the bike away. And if you don't push the bike away, well, then the front end doesn't drop. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You don't keep a lower trajectory in the air. And you see that in Supercross with like a Hampshire and these guys, a lot of guys, they keep their legs bent in between sections, and when they jump, they don't finish their movements. So then they're catching more air than the next, or in between jumps or rollers, and that bike goes sideways, and you're more sucked into the bike. You're going to be more affected. But if you're straightened up more off the face of a jump or in a whoop section and the bike goes sideways, you're going to be able to move more. You're going to be more pliable, so to speak. You're going to have more joints moving, and you're always meeting everything with movement, like we talked before. If you meet a mistake with movement, you're going to make it more subtle. If you meet a mistake with stiffness, you're going to magnify it. And so this is what I saw at Southwick, and I've been seeing it all year, but it kind of, really, I mean, it just, now it's giving me a time to talk about it. It just stood out in my mind, but I get a chance to talk about it, that in Supercross, I've always said it, that Jet straightens his legs more than anybody off the jumps. And that's why he stays lower, and that's why you see him almost go out instead of up, right?
Got it.
And so Sexton has great technique, but his knees are just a little bit bent. He needs to straighten them out a little bit more.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Maybe he needs to straighten his arms out a little bit more, because then you get that pop, especially in Supercross off a jump. If I go off a jump right like that and my legs straighten out and my arms straighten out, that bike does this, right? But if I go right off the jump and my legs are bent, my arms are bent, then I have to do this. You get what I'm saying?
You gotta
and if I
arch.
push the bike away, maybe that's 6 inches that I made up in the air, because you're not going to make up momentum in the air with no wheels on the ground. So if I push away that bike, maybe I went 6 inches a little bit farther, but now add that up by 30 jumps. Okay, 6 times 30 is, I'm a motor, I don't know.
Yeah, 6 times 30, it's like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's that much, okay?
Okay.
But in Supercross, and that was the thing, is that when Jet came into Supercross, I think everybody thought that he was going to be so much faster than everybody, and he thought he was going to be so much faster than everybody, but you're only having 50 seconds to be so much faster than everybody. And an outdoor track, you have 2 minutes to be faster than everybody.
6 times 30 is 180.
Okay, 180, so 180 inches.
Yeah.
Okay, how many feet is that? Times, you divide that by 12.
Okay, so you're looking
I'll keep talking, you do that.
Okay.
So when you have 2 minutes to make up time, well, now you have a half a second, or 2 seconds. But you only have 50 seconds to make up time. Maybe you only have, 3/100ths of a second.
Okay.
And so I think that was a little bit hard for him to understand when he came into Supercross this year, coming from outdoors where he just made up so much time on people. Then Supercross came and he was only making up 3/100ths of a second. But you got to look at the track. It's not giving you time to do that.
So
right?
you're gaining 12 feet.
Okay, yeah, 12 feet. Let's say 12 feet. And that's in Supercross.
Yeah.
That's just in Supercross. Okay, now 12 feet with speed is now, maybe half a second. You know what I mean? It starts to all add up. So that's what I'm seeing, is that they're finishing their movements a lot. And same with Deegan, he's straightening his legs out. And you'll see it at Southwick. He straightens his legs out a lot, so it's always putting weight to that rear wheel. If I put weight to the rear wheel, I'm getting more traction. More traction, more momentum. More momentum, more speed. More speed, quicker lap time. Done. And you're going to be more efficient too, because you're working with the bike. You're working with the bike. You're talking to the bike. You're not just kind of hanging on to the bike. So as you see, those guys, yeah. Then you go back in the pack and it's hot. They're kind of bouncing around a little bit more because they're locked up and they're not finishing their movement up. It's like the suspension riding Southwick and your suspension only moving halfway. You'd be fucked.
Yeah.
You're right? That suspension has to finish its movement. So that's one of the biggest things, but you only can do that if you're on your toes, because when you straighten your legs, you need to have your ankles bend also. Right? So it's a whole thing. So that's when I teach people, when they come to me, I say, look, we're going to start at the first point. Because anytime you go to a track, a new track or any track, what's the first thing you think about? What kind of conditions it is.
Yeah.
Why? So you know what tires to put on.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about what pipe to put on, how to adjust your suspension, this and that.
No.
First, you think about tires.
Yep.
Then you go to suspension. Then you go to engine. Then you go to your way of riding it. It works its way up. It's just like a tree. A tree doesn't produce fruit until its fucking roots are allowing it to.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the whole scenario, is working your way up. So the toes you have to be on the toes, so then there's weight towards the rear wheel. You have to be on your toes, so then there's movement at the first point of contact from body to bike, just like the first point of contact from bike to ground is suspension movement. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Then you work your way up, and those knees need to extend. They can't be half cocked. Then you work your way up to the hips, and the hips you have to every movement is done from the hips.
Yep.
That's where it's initiated. Everything's from the hips, right? From the hips is where that upper body goes forward and that lower body goes to the rear end of the bike at the hips.
Got
so
it.
that's where you work your way up. Movement, finish your movement, and then initiation.
Okay.
Right? And then if you're in that position, that back should be straight because, like we talked about, the core.
Yep.
A straight back, you have more balance. You know, a straight back, you have your core. Then your arms can be loose, right? Because there's only one way to go fast on a motorcycle, and that's with the flow. And the only one way to have a flow is with loose arms, right?
Yeah, you can't be tensed up.
Yeah, and so that's what you're seeing with these guys is that they just have the best technique of everybody.
So my question to you on this particular technique, because it all makes sense from a physics angle, what about how you deal with the jumps? Because a lot of riders, especially with this single line premise at a lot of these tracks, use the jumps to make their passes. Mm-hmm. How is that happening as far as, is it just because the approach to the jump is giving them more speed and therefore they can pass in the air?
Well, I think, when you use your technique properly, then you're able to come up to the jump quicker.
Okay.
Because if I come up to the jump quicker and then I extend myself and I pop myself, well, that's throwing the bike down. I'm not going to create more air.
Got it.
But if I come off the jump right and then I stop, well, then that bike has to do this. Then I got to come forward to bring that bike down. So you're doing more of an arc instead of a flat.
Got it.
See what you're saying?
Yeah.
Or as you saw Deegan come off the jump, it was almost a
Scrubs.
crash. It was almost a crash.
Okay.
But he saved it. But he came off and you scrubbed it.
Yeah.
You know. So there's certain jumps that you can scrub, but you don't scrub everything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's certain jumps that you can scrub to throw off speed and keep the bike. Why? What do? You keep the bike lower.
Low.
That's the whole key, is keeping the bike lower, not doing this big arc.
Yeah.
This big arc. So if you're flat-footed, your back is rounded, your butt's tucked, and everything you're doing with your arms, you're going to make arcs. You're not going to make more kind of straight lines off jumps. And so you see Jet pass people in rhythm sections in the Supercross where most can't, is because he's making more straight lines and not arcs.
Got it.
And it's because of that pop.
Yep.
Right? And so that is what I'm seeing, why those two guys are a little bit faster than the other. One, Jet is he's smoother, he's softer than the others, and Deegan is a lot more aggressive. You know, just hitting things harder, getting into things harder.
Now,
And what do those things both come from? Confidence. You got to have confidence to be able to slow down and still know that you're fast.
Okay. That was
Because
my
once
next
you
question.
slow down, you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm not going as fast. So my mechanic used to, when I was racing, my mechanic would put on the board, hey, slow down. And other people are like, what the fuck are you telling them to slow down for? And they're like, just watch. Because I had the ability to override. And especially on a 125, you could override.
Yeah.
And so now you're blasting, you're hitting things, and you're not getting you're not getting your forward momentum or your exit speed. So Jet has the confidence to slow down to be faster. Deegan has the confidence to override to be faster.
Yeah.
But again, my technique wasn't as sound as these guys' techniques because I wasn't at that point of changing the technique in motocross. So, you know, I started to kind of think about it 2003, all that, very loose arms. Every corner I would come in and say, hey, loose arms, look ahead. Loose arms, look ahead. Loose arms, look ahead. Every corner for 30 fucking minutes, I would do that. So every corner was fast because that's where you make up your time and that's where you lose time is in corners, right? Corners for dough, jumps for show. So my approach was clean. In the middle of the corner had momentum, and then my exit was fast, right?
Yep.
So my analogy when I teach is slow down 3 feet coming in the corner so you can make 300 feet faster coming out of the corner, right? And so
you just said a phrase that would really ring true, which is corners for dough,
jumps for show.
jumps for show.
Yeah.
And that to me is just one of those things that I think that should almost be on like a refrigerator magnet.
Yeah, I mean that's been in the sport for a bit, you know, but it's just that's the analogy. But my analogy is slow up 3 feet coming in, so you can make 300 feet coming out. And so add up 300. Okay, you have 20 corners on a track. 3 feet or 300 feet times 20. You know what I mean? Oh. And don't do the math, but it's pretty simple to figure that one out. And so that is the key, is to be able to have that. So if I had the technique that these guys are using now that I taught the sport, then I would be able to override. But you can't override when your technique doesn't allow it. Deegan's technique is sound, very sound, more sound than anybody's in that class.
Okay.
And so he's able to override. Okay. Now, if he never took his neck brace off, he would never be who he is now. Impossible.
Well,
No
yeah,
way.
because he doesn't have the movement. You
No
just
way.
don't have the way to
But his
control
knees were bent. He
Yeah.
was flat-footed, and this and that. So once I had him take his neck brace off, and they really felt the difference, is when his technique started to change and when his trajectory of speed went out the roof.
So, a question on the ankle flex, because last year we had a really bad accident with Eli Tomac, and he actually injured his Achilles
Yeah.
at the ankle area. And he always apparently, from what I was always told, he took out the braces that the Alpine Stars boots have in them.
Yeah.
That's so he could have more of that flexibility in his ankles.
I would say so, but it's there. Look, in life,
Yeah.
there's fate
Yep.
and there's free will. Fate, shit's just gonna happen, and that was meant to happen.
Okay.
Because if you look at the jump, he did nothing wrong.
No,
he did nothing wrong. He actually should have hurt his ankle after this problem when he cased it.
Yep.
It was fate. It was written in stone, supposed to happen. That's his test. How are you going to deal from it? How are you going to survive from it? You know what I mean?
100%.
It's fate, just like Kenny. You
Yep.
know, when he crashed off, that was fate.
Yep.
He didn't do anything wrong.
Nope.
He did nothing wrong. So there's a lot. Sometimes in life, there's fate and free will. Fate's shit you can't control. Now the things you can't control, now you have the free will. How are you going to deal with it? Are you going to take it to the left or are you going to take it to the right? Are you going to progress yourself or are you going to hold yourself back? It's up to you. It's not up to God. It's not up to Messiah. It's not up to anything like that. It's up to you. Do you have the strength, the will, and the intelligence to progress from it? Or are you weak, stupid, and lazy that it's gonna hold you back? So I've looked at the thing with Eli and he did nothing wrong
Okay.
at all. It's just what was supposed to happen. I'm sorry.
I just was asking that question because that was one of those things that came up in the media, and there was a level of ignorance to that, to where it was like, wow, those ankle braces, are they hindering?
No,
or helping you?
everybody has to have something why.
Okay.
Nobody can just say it just was meant to be or whatever. Oh, that's why, and that's why, and they always have to have a reason to fucking point at something to blame. That's the whole thing with people in this world, is they're so weak, they always have to have something to blame. They can't take the responsibility that shit happens sometimes.
I was going to say shit happens.
You know what I mean? That's the same thing in life. They blame the evil and they blame it's just like, no, sometimes in life shit happens. Suck it up, grow some balls, understand that this what this world is and what life is, and fucking move on.
100%.
You know what I mean? It's plain and simple.
100%. Okay, so we are now at our first break.
Again.
I'm really surprised. Like the time, you just moved the time right there, just on technique. Let's come back, and we will go into some other news that I've discovered recently, and I'll throw a couple questions at you, and let's see how that works. It is the Big 49. You're listening to what do you call it? Ryan Hughes.
Look ahead, baby. We're always looking ahead. We're not going backwards.
Okay, looking ahead. It's the Big 49.
We are back with the Big 49. Ryan Hughes looking ahead.
Nice. So last break you went into a lot on technique, a lot on just performance and efficiency, keeping the focus on the track, keeping the bike low, keeping things focused. By the way, I love the phrase, the cash into the or money into the corners. Yeah. I love that,
Yeah.
by the way. So my other question on that is, when you're looking at these riders on these specific tracks, and I'm thinking of one specific track in my head, Larocco's Leap. Mm-hmm. That's one of those leaps you can't ignore.
Yeah.
You can't go around it. You just have to make it. You have to cruise through it. A lot of guys lose a lot of time there, apparently, because obviously they're spending a lot of time in the air.
Yeah.
Does that ever, when you get to a track that has that scenario, does that ever hinder you? Like I noticed, like in Supercross this year, they had a couple jumps that were literally across the stadium, across the track.
Yeah.
Is that to slow you down, or what?
Well, with Larocco's Leap, it's definitely faster to make it because, especially now it's much easier than back in the day.
Okay.
Because the third jump, or the in landing jump, is so big.
Yep.
Like you can almost see it. You know what I mean? So now you're gonna single or double, and then have to do this big thing. Back in my day, dude, it was dangerous as fuck. It was just a little knuckle. I swear to God, there's a little knuckle out there.
Okay.
And so if you didn't make it, it was just the hardest thing. So a bigger jump is so much easier to kind of make, because you have a bigger down ramp. Back in my day, it was like a little knuckle out there because not that many people did it. Because
Okay.
we're on 2 strokes.
Yep.
So it was like a leap. And so with that jump, yes, you're going to be faster because you can power down the down ramp. And the third jump is a big one, so you're kind of going up and then back down. But sometimes, sometimes big jumps could be a little bit slower because once you're in the air, there's no more forward momentum unless you do something with the body.
Okay.
So that's why I always say extension. If you extend, you're throwing that bike maybe, like I say, a foot farther. And I remember I trained Brock Hepler.
Okay.
And Brock Hepler had this thing of kind of going back. And then I think that was when Chad Reed and stuff, and I say, hey, look at Chad, how he extends. He's getting that bike to go lower. And so I started to get him to do that, and he started to make up a little bit more time around the track because he was throwing that bike a little bit more forward when there's no momentum from the tires being on the ground, right?
100%.
And so that is, it's kind of a catch-22 that way, but normally if a jump is built to be jumped, you jump it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You jump
Okay.
it. But now if that jump is a risk and you're casing it or bouncing off it, or you got to set up more, or if this jump is causing you to get so much air, well then no, it's not as fast.
Got it.
So that kind of thing.
So, a quick question on jumps in particular to like that. Is it always better to take those jumps as low as possible, or is, like a Larocco's leap, how low can you go and still make that jump?
I guess it depends on the speed that you're going up to it.
Okay.
If you're only going up to it with the speed just enough to make it, because for us to do it, they'll see pictures of the handlebars being in our lap.
Yeah.
And our feet off the foot pegs because we had to pull up on these 125s so much just to get over it and then throw the bike. So
Okay.
you get that extra foot, 2 feet. Nowadays, they don't. But let's say a 250F is just getting over it. Well, he is going to get that big arc. Now, a 450 that has a lot of momentum, well, now he can maybe scrub it or throw it down a little bit to get over it, and he will make up more time in the air. You know what I mean? So I guess it's how much more momentum you come up to the jump is how much you're able to scrub it or make that trajectory a little bit more flat.
So scrubbing requires you to have a lot more speed, basically.
Yeah, a lot more speed, but then sometimes scrubbing, you have to slow up to
Okay.
scrub. So you see in Supercross a lot of times, Jet, you don't scrub much. He doesn't really. It was back in the, thing is that, Bubba came in and scrubbed some things, but then all these kids, just went ballistic with it until you scrubbed everything, and they were scrubbing braking bumps.
Yeah.
Like Carmichael never scrubbed.
No.
Dungy never scrubbed.
No.
Villapoto really never scrubbed.
Nope.
You know what I mean? So it was kind of just Bubba doing off some jumps that made a difference, And again, it was him. His technique approach was so much more kind of like ahead of everybody's, except he had really one bad weakness, and that he rode flat-footed.
Okay.
And that's where all his crashes came from. He rode flat-footed. If you go back, he was flat-footed as fuck. And that's why that bike looked almost kind of like he was always on the verge of a crash.
So
if he rode on his toes and gripped his ankles, oh my God. But he rode flat-footed. So whatever the track gives to the bike is given to you. So if you're flat-footed, it's met with stiffness.
Yep.
If you're on your toes, it's met with softness.
Yep.
Plain and simple.
More surface area, basically.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say more. Yeah, flat-footed, you're more
Yeah,
surface
more
area.
surface area.
But what do you do flat-footed? Nothing. There's not
nothing.
a sport, activity, or movement that you do at its highest point flat-footed. The only thing you do flat-footed is watching everybody do something.
Yeah.
Because you're standing behind the fucking fence,
Exactly.
right?
And speaking of that, because you just kind of walked me into something there, how much does suspension play a key into this? Because and the reason why I ask this is because I remember watching Adam Cianciarulo. This is probably 3 years back now. Mm-hmm. But he was on the 450 going on an outdoor. I want to say it was at either Unadilla or Southwick. It was a really, really beat up track. And I watched his suspension it looked like a supercross suspension. It looked very stiff in the rear. And I thought to myself as I was watching Eli and a couple of the other riders, they were much softer, much less aggressive. How much of that, as a rider, do you go through with your mechanic and you tell your mechanic, hey, I need this to be outdoor softer for high speed, or do they make that decision?
No, suspension is the key. Suspension is everything.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter how fast your engine is if your bike handles like shit.
Yep.
Right? So that's the key. Is like, yes, tires are important. That's the first key. Okay, like Southwick.
Yep.
The first thing is these tires.
Yep.
Because you can have your suspension set up for sand, your engine, your gearing, everything. But then if you have hard packed tires, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Right? So tires are first, but suspension's always second. And then suspension is a very, very sensitive place because everybody sets their suspension up a little bit different. And so you don't want it too stiff because then it's just kind of deflecting off everything.
Yeah.
You don't want it too soft because it's going through the motion too much. So you want to be able to have that balance there, but everybody has their own little flair with it. And it's down to a point at that level of one click. They come in, hey, just give me one click. There we go. Or what I used to do, is go, hey, give me 5 cc's of more oil in my fork.
Okay.
Why? I wouldn't change the beginning of the stroke by clickers.
Nope.
That would change the beginning of it and make it a little bit more harsh. My problem is that the forks, the bike was going too much to the stroke when I was coming in the corners, so I had to feel like I had to push back. And if I have to push back with my body, what happens to my arms? They tense up.
Yep.
So now I can't let that bike come to me and away from me. So that 10 cc's of oil kept that bike up a little bit. And then I could allow that movement to happen in my arms because the bike wouldn't be down here. It'd be up a little bit.
Okay.
Even sag. Sag was a big thing for me. Even a couple millimeters, I would notice a difference. And if it's too low, then I'm always pulling myself up. If it's too high, I'm always pushing myself back. So it has to have that balance there. So suspension is the key, but everybody has their own little flair with it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, yeah.
On that suspension routine, did you have a special suspension setup person, or did you just have your mechanic who was just general?
No, we in the factories you have a full technician.
Okay.
A full technician, but on the track, you and your mechanic, hey, 1 click, 2 clicks. Hey, the sag, this and that. But the setup of it, doing the valving and the this and the this and the testing is all coming from a suspension technician.
Got it.
Yeah. So when I was at Team Kawasaki, we had somebody for the forks and somebody for the rear shock.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 guys doing
Yeah,
suspension.
2 guys. Yeah.
And there's a balance there. There's a tricky balance between the front and the rear.
Yeah, 100%. They have to talk to each other.
Uh-huh.
They have to talk to each other. You can't have supercross front forks and outdoor rear shock.
Nope.
You got to have that balance, and they have to be able to talk to each other. And so that's where it comes with testing. But also, you can't be at a point where you're just always trying to make it better, or always trying to make it better, because you start chasing your tail.
Yeah.
You got to find a good setup that works at Glen Helen, that works at Paula, that works at Hardpack, this, that, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And then you adjust it by, clickers, maybe drop the forks, raise the forks, maybe drop the sag, raise the sag. But you will change maybe the valving, the change, if you go to a sand track like Southwick.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Now you want your forks to be more stiff, then your back shock be a little bit softer or lower, so you can keep that front end high, especially when you're going through the sand.
You don't.
Now, if you go to a hard pack track, you want it maybe a little bit different. You want it to be a little bit more front end dominant so you can have traction with that front end. But you got to be very careful because in hard pack you get a lot of square edge. So now if the back end, if the back end is too stiff, then it's going to start just kind of being super chattery.
Okay.
So yes, suspension is a big key.
It's a huge key, and that's why I brought it up, because as you were talking about technique, I'm thinking, how does a rider combat the suspension versus their technique in a situation where obviously you're always training with the bike? How many days in advance before a major race would you normally train for?
So again, if the race is Saturday, then Sunday you're flying, traveling, then Monday you're on it, Tuesday you're on it, maybe Wednesday you take off, Thursday you're on it, Friday's a travel day, and then Saturday you're on it.
Okay.
So you're riding probably 3 days a week plus that. Sometimes somebody's going to ride 4 days a week. Just depends maybe where they're at with their confidence and their feel.
Okay.
Or some people might ride every day just a little bit. It just depends. Some people, need to ride a lot. Some people don't. Stuff like that.
And so with a track like Southwick, because there's sand, it's a very
Yeah.
sandy track, and this is why I'm bringing this up. And you're in California. How do you train for that?
We would have tracks like there was kind of 4th Street, or we'd go out to the desert.
Okay.
We'd have tracks out there, and we start riding sand a little bit more out there.
All right.
Or you stay in between races and go up to New England, and ride in the sand all week.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we'd also do too, is go from, I think it was used to go like Buzz Creek and then whatever. So we'd stay up there and ride during the week in sand. So then you're getting used to it. If you're back home, then you find those tracks that are just big, rough, sandy
Okay.
things, But if you've been to Southwick enough, you kind of you kind of get it. You know what I mean?
You get it.
You get it,
I
yeah.
just remember Southwick has a lot of it's just a lot of rolling hills, and it's very sandy.
But it's not really that sandy. There's a little bit of sand, but there's a hard base. Now sand, you go to Lomo.
Okay.
There's no base to it. Like you take any of those guys in America, and you take them to Lomo, they will get destroyed. I would say Hurlings puts 10 seconds a lap on them. Oh yeah,
Okay.
you saw in the Donations.
Yeah,
you saw the Donations that year. They crashed. I think in
Yeah.
the first turn, came back and lapped Barsha and all those guys that were good in the sand. And it's a whole different story with Lomo. Like you have to ride there. There's sand, and then there's sand specialists.
Okay.
Hurlings is sand specialist. Same with
Yeah.
Cairoli was a sand specialist. Same with Everts was a sand specialist. So it's just different. It's just different levels of sand.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of the European riders, when they come over here, ride Supercross. I find that they feel almost like a fish out of water, so to speak. Supercross is a special animal, obviously.
Well, the thing is that the Supercross riders the European riders that come over and do good.
Yep.
What are they all? French. They're French. And so French, they have a Supercross championship.
Okay.
Right, so they're brought up in it. You saw Langston and all that. They always have this pushback, Now it's different. It's different because they've caught up with the Americans in that technical side.
Okay.
That technical side they've caught up because they've changed the tracks in Europe.
Yep.
But it's still going to take time for them to get used to that jump after jump after jump after jump, whoop 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 thing, and so that takes time for them to kind of get involved with. Australia has a Supercross series.
Okay.
So it's just getting brought up in that. And so that's why when you go to the nations, the Europeans are usually the fastest, or have been, so to speak, is because, when the tracks get muddy,
Yep.
well, they have more experience. The track's sandy, they have more experience. And so that's, where you're going to see the difference from that. Just like we talked about Dean Wilson being in Brazil.
Yeah.
In a Supercross, he's going to have more. He's going to blow them away. But if it's an outdoor, I don't think he'd have that. He'd have such a gap on them.
So speaking of outdoor, did you ever jump over into any of the off-road series, enduro type riding at all?
I think it's good to do a little off-road sometimes, just because it's so gnarly.
Okay.
And you have so many different conditions, that you can learn some from that. And also, when I raced Supercross, and I know Carmichael did too, is that we'd ride a little bit outdoors to keep that speed up, to keep that looking ahead up, to keep that the ability to be relaxed, being out of control a little bit, because motocross is da 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 da, and Supercross is very, very kind of like precision, like straight turn, where motocross is kind of like you're always kind of skating around a little bit.
Okay.
So that allows you to be a little bit looser. Like in Supercross, when I rode and I'd find myself getting a little bit tight, I'd go ride in the hills.
Okay.
And do jumps and stuff, and and the bike would kick out and all this stuff. But then it's like, you'd learn to relax on the motorcycle a little bit instead of just trying to be always so perfect.
So on your training motorcycle that you would train with, it was set up obviously for your day-to-day training riding, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you would get to the track, Were there massive amounts of differences between what Mitch would bring versus what you were training on?
It just depends on the level that you're at. So when you're a factory, you have the same bike.
Okay.
You have the same bike, but the only thing that's different is that bike at home is a little bit more worn out a little bit because it's day to day to day to day. You know what I mean? Maybe now it's different, but that was the only thing. It took a little bit to get used to things being a little bit tighter. You know, chassis a little different. Maybe it's not stretched out as much, and that. But the bikes are the same. Like I would never ride a different bike than what I raced on. No way.
Okay.
But if you don't have the money, then you probably are.
Yeah.
But at the factory level, their race bikes, their training bikes are the same as their race bikes.
So your 125 was the same as Mitch would hand you on race day?
Yeah. So I went through probably, I don't know how many, 15 125s in 1 year.
Woo!
Yeah, I mean, because my deal was I'd leave my house, meet Jeff Ward, and that at Central.
Yep.
And we do a 50-minute moto, and then we do a 20-minute moto. And this track was it was unbelievable. It was the gnarliest, shittiest track on earth. Like 2 motos, every knobby's gone. So I would destroy my bike, and so I always had 2 bikes. So I'd leave there, go to Kawasaki, drop that one off, pick up the one they fixed.
Okay.
Next day, do the same thing, go down, drop this one off, and pick up the one they fixed. And it was just like it was a revolving door.
Round robin.
Because 125s, you just killed those things.
Oh, yeah.
Killed them.
Yeah, they only build power on the pipe. You've got to be on the pipe constantly.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
And so when you're on the 125 and you're on the pipe, and your riding style obviously was on the pipe all the time, versus the 250s now, are they utilizing a lot of that torque with those 250s?
Yeah, like I say, nowadays you need to ride the bike how it's made. It's how it's built to be ridden.
Okay.
You ride the bike how it's built to be ridden, then you ride it fast. If you're riding a 4-stroke and you're hitting a rev limiter, you're going nowhere. See, on a 2-stroke, the power, if you over rev it, there's still power. But on a 4-stroke, it's done.
Yeah.
That's why you see the best riders lug the bike. So then you're keeping it in the meat of that power band.
Yep.
And the bikes have so much power now. If you're not using all that power, well then you're missing the point. And like I always say, hey, if you're gonna over rev your bike, then tell Mitch not to put so much power into it, because you're not using it right. You know what I mean? You got to use all the power that you can, so then you don't have to ride as hard. And so that's why I feel like these guys don't have to ride as hard as back in our day, because you had to override the bike so much because there wasn't as much power.
Yeah.
And the tracks were the same, just as rough, if not rougher. The weather was the same, It's just as hot, all this bullshit,
Yeah.
So there's nothing different. It's just a technology change. It's not the riders are better. Not at all. You take Jeff Ward, Rick Johnson, Jeremy McGrath, myself, we Bob Hanna.
Yep.
In these days, they'd still be at the top because it's a mentality.
Yeah.
It's a mentality, not anything else. You know?
It's in the rider. So this week there was some big news that kind of came out in the industry, so to speak, on the business side.
I wouldn't say it came out in the industry. I'd say it just came out into maybe somebody I talked to, and maybe I could be wrong.
Okay.
Completely wrong. But who cares? I don't care if I'm wrong.
Okay.
I just put it out there and see if it comes true. If it comes true, then man, I'm a genius. If it's wrong, then I just heard the wrong news.
Here's the thing, okay? I tend to look at the tea leaves and kind of, you got to be able to put 2 and 2 together, because people don't want to admit when they make a mistake, especially in corporate America. They don't want to admit when they make a mistake. So when you're looking around and you're seeing the business culture and you're seeing what's going on in the industry right now, and you're seeing the other manufacturers out there, Yamaha makes the engines. Their big business is actually they're the foundry for Toyota.
Yeah, that and the music industry and all that. So they have something to back them up. Honda is a billion. Their car industry is massive.
Yeah.
Kawasaki makes fucking ships, man.
And shipping containers.
And more, whatever, like tanker ships,
Big stuff.
Yeah, big stuff. So they're not just making motorcycles. Now you look at KTM, they're only making motorcycles and really off-road motorcycles. So when they come out, and so this is what I hear, okay? The 2 things I hear. One it's kind of big news, and it's kind of surprising, and it could be wrong, but KTM is only having in Europe is only having one rider next year, and that's Jeffrey Hurlings on the 450 class. Their 250 operation is done.
Okay.
Husqvarna, I hear, is done. They're not having a factory team next year. And Gas is done. They're not having a factory team next year. Because, again, if you're only trying to make money off motorcycles or only are making money off motorcycles and that industry is dying a little bit because of the economy, well, then you're going to be dying.
Yeah.
So maybe 10 years ago, the things were booming. And now they're going to go, oh, well, we're gonna have 3 dicks, kind of. We're going to make the white one and we're going to make the red one. And then we're going to own the sport, which kind of started happening a little bit. But if nobody's buying them, that's what happens. So that's what I hear is like they're not selling bikes.
Yeah.
Because this industry isn't growing at all. It's not growing. It's dying. It's because of what's happening on the outside of it.
Yeah.
People can't afford it. It's way too expensive.
Exactly.
It's way too expensive to live nowadays. It's not that just motorcycles are expensive. It's just way too expensive to live. It's like my buddy just bought a bike and he says he spent like $12,000.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy shit! I'm serious. If I wouldn't got anything, there's no way I would ride. No way I would ride and waste my money on this because it's just too expensive. In every sport, like we talk about baseball, football, soccer. You buy a soccer ball, you buy cleats, you're good for the year. You buy a baseball bat and a glove, you're good for the year. You buy a basketball and some shoes, you're good for the year. Motocross, you have to buy gas and new stuff all the time. A chain, a tire, filter stuff, filter oil. Okay, now your engine has to be redone. Oh, now you broke it. Like, holy shit. Then you go into, you don't have to pay money to go play football, baseball, basketball. You show up at a field. Every track, you're paying $30, $50, $100.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to pay money to play Little League and all this stuff. Every race you go to is $60, $70 a sign up, plus gate fee, plus practice fee, plus the systems fee to qualify for something.
Yeah.
Okay? And so I hear this is what's going to happen. And also I hear maybe in USA that they're not having a 250F team next year. Like they're going to satellite it.
Yeah.
Because they can't afford it. Right? And again, if you're putting a $45 million facility in Temecula and you're trying to make that off the motocross that isn't growing, what are you going to do?
100%.
And again, and how much money are they putting into MotoGP with KTM and Gas. Yeah. And they don't even make street bikes.
No.
So, like I say, I could be completely wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm so wrong that everybody can laugh at me, but this is what I'm hearing. Because I don't want to see the sport die.
No.
I really don't. I don't want to see the sport die at all because that's been my bread and butter. But I can't help the economy.
Well,
I can't help the higher-ups in this world are just trying to gouge you for every little thing there is because everything is run by greed.
Yeah.
That's it. It's run by greed. It's run by sociopaths. And even in this sport, the people who run the sport are sociopaths. They don't give a fuck about anybody except, like we talked about more, their dollar amounts.
Yep.
And whoever they are, I don't know who they are.
Yeah. Understood. So,
second news.
Well, okay.
Okay. You want to go on that?
Well, second news I was just going to bring up is the political landscape of what we're dealing with right now because they're trying to shut down outdoor riding. And there's enactments within the state of California. There's enactments within the Bureau of Land Management. And as we all know, we all grew up going to the desert, riding with our families, having those father-son / campfire times with our families. And they're trying to eliminate that. And so one of the big movements that we're trying to push this year on Big 49, we're not trying to tell people who to vote for. We're just trying to tell people, vote for the candidate that's going to support motocross. Yeah. They're going to support moto lifestyle. They're going to support that outdoor living, that real aspect of it. And so I wanted to get your take on that.
This has been going on since day one, I've heard about it since I was a kid, shut down this. And things have been getting shut down. So, when I was younger, we could ride anywhere. We had 7 hills, Dust Bowl, 71 acres, all within riding distance from our houses. Now those are all houses. They're all houses, right? So that's one thing. It's not just they're shutting it down. It's growth. Growth has shut it down. Yeah. Temecula. I used to ride where the mall was. I used to ride everywhere there. Now there's housing tracks. So growth. But then you get these fucking people that want to hug trees and kiss turtles and think that we're destroying everything out there, and that's not the case, But they want to go show how tough they are, and they get this pride thing that they take things away from people. It's a weird mentality,
Yeah.
Sociopaths also. I think the next stage, and if you want to keep this thing going, is going to the reservations, Indians.
Okay.
Because you see how much money Paula's making. Holy shit. Okay, they make a lot of money from it. So why doesn't all these reservations start having tracks and open riding maybe on their land or something like that? That's the only way that I can see, because they're sovereign land. They can do what they want. You can't sue them. They do what they want. So that is something that can happen if all this stuff starts getting closed down, these tracks get closed down. Well, why doesn't Saboba and Pachanga and, Paula and all these guys just start having tracks and ride things? It's a good way to make money for their tribe, because no tribe is really that big, so to speak. And so there's a way that could happen there, at least to keep motocross going. I don't know about off-road, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm not a politician, and I don't really give two shits about the politics. But when it's starting to shut down, your kind of bread and butter, then you got to make sure you're voting for the right person, and paying attention to laws and things that are getting put in there without you even knowing.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I look at it from a perspective of even just family outing. Like, I want to take the motorhome out with the wife and the kids, and we want to go to the desert and have those family moments.
Yeah.
And they're shutting that down.
Yeah, but to shut it all down, I don't know. I think little sections and this and that. But, you still see Glamis, you still Brago and all that. I mean, it's got a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
Just... I don't know.
Alcatillo's on that list, by the way.
Yeah, Alcatillo. But it's been on that list for a long ass time.
Yeah.
It's been on that list for 20, 30 years,
Okay.
It really has. So.
And I love riding Alcatillo.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up riding there. We'd go there every weekend. My mom and dad, me and my brother, and I had a 3-wheeler and, a little 50, and before I even raced. We'd go out there all the time.
Now, as a kid growing up, how much of that takes you back a little bit, just when you think about the times you had with your family camping and being out at Alcatillo?
Yeah, it was great, because my dad would always go out there. We'd go out there as family and with other families, and I remember just watching Walker Evans and these guys in their trucks go by and looking at blow sand and just be like, oh my god. Now I look at it, and I'm like, what? I think I could ride my bicycle up it,
Yeah.
So it was just like everything was so much bigger when you're a kid.
It was magic when you were a kid.
Yeah, and so it was great times back then, and that's kind of I used to ride before I raced.
Yeah.
For fun. So that was good times.
Well, I want to keep that going. So
yeah, definitely.
By the way, I think we just finished this week's show. Yeah.
Just did.
You smoked through an hour
Well,
of technique and awesomeness.
well, I mean, hey, give me something to talk about, and I'll talk to you.
So
You know what I mean?
every week you're here live.
Yeah, I'm having a good time with it, man. At first, I'm kind of okay, but I had to find my groove. And then again, once we started, I had had the Montezuma's Revenge or some shit that I call it AI sickness.
Okay.
Because these viruses that we're getting they weren't like back in the day.
No.
Like these things hit you hard. It's like it's a part-time job now to stay healthy.
Yeah.
And if you're not having that part-time job, you're going to get affected by these things all the time. Like there's a doctor study come out now saying that if you do not use saunas, you are going to be sick. Because saunas detox you down to that cellular level, not just a sauna, far infrared. So I've been using far infrared saunas for like 20 years, 25 years.
Okay.
So this is why I feel like I've healed a lot from things and stayed away from things, stuff like that. And so right now, everybody in this world needs to be aware of these AI viruses and be on top of it. Really.
Yeah, I think every sickness we're getting now is engineered.
Oh yeah,
100%.
yeah.
All right, and the number to call you at when you're in the studio is
866-492. I should have it remembered. I don't know. My eyes always go there. 4449.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Ryan Hughes, looking ahead. Big 49. See you guys next week.